What is up? Hopefully you guys have a wonderful day. Back here with some more Resident Evil 5 gameplay for you. And today I'm going to continue a trend that I've made in the past with Resident Evil characters, talking about disrespect with certain Resident Evil characters. Now, the one that I did that was probably the biggest one was the one on Claire Redfield being the most disrespected character in Resident Evil. And there's various degrees of other disrespected characters, like I think Jill Valentine has been disrespected. But there's another character that's been disrespected, maybe even more than those two, which is crazy to think about it, but in a different type of way. Not in terms of people don't look at him as being very good or they don't respect what they did, but in terms of they don't even notice them. I mean, this person is practically invisible. They're so invisible, honestly, they could have been cast for Sue Storm in the newest Fantastic Four movie because nobody ever mentions them. So, let me build some context for the situation so we can get to what you were talking about. How many times have you heard people argue about who's the better character, Chris or Leon? You know, who's the better character? Who win in a fight? Who's stronger than who? Who's got the better accomplishment? Who's better, Chris versus Leon? And we've heard this fight since the dawn of time. And you'll have Chris fans going back, well, hey, you know what? I was the one that started the franchise and Resident Evil 1. And Leon will say, well, you know what? I popularized the franchise in Resident Evil 2. And it'll go back and forth. And Leon will say, I was in, one of the greatest games ever made in Resident Evil 4. And then Chris will finally retort and say something that I'm pretty sure we've heard multiple times said before. And they'll say, hey, I'm the one that defeated Wesker, the main main villain antagonist of the entire Resident Evil franchise. I defeated Wesker. What do you got to say about that, Leon fanboys? What do you have to say about that? And slowly and silently, you might hear a whimper in the background. And you might be wondering, what is that? And it's kind of hard to hear because, as I said, nobody knows it. And you hear someone kind of whimpering and sighing, and you think, what the heck is that noise? What is that? And it's not Leon fanboys. It's not Chris fanboys. It's not Jill or Claire or any. It's another character that's practically invisible because the second you hear the phrase, I, Chris Redfield, defeated Wesker, they just kind of look down in depression. What am I talking about? Because the phrase is so incorrectly wrong, it's not even funny. If you still haven't figured it out or the light bulb still hasn't clicked, allow me to elaborate. Yes, Chris Redfield did have a hand in defeating Wesker. However, he did not do it alone. And unlike what a flashbang does in terms of blinding you from the truth, I'm not going to be blinded because I'm going to tell you the straight up facts that people just want to pretend didn't happen. So, what really happened? In Resident Evil 5, yes, Chris Redfield did defeat Wesker. But he didn't do it alone. I know, shocking. But you might not have noticed this. But there was another character in the game. And not just in the game, but in the game from the very beginning. That apparently, as I said, is more invisible than Sue Storm herself. That was there helping you from beginning to the end and ultimately had a huge hand in the downfall of Resident Evil's greatest villain. Someone who could argue had maybe the greatest debut of any Resident Evil character when I put the context into this situation. But in case it still doesn't ring a bell since people just pretend they don't exist or pretend they don't see them, well, I'm going to show you the angel herself, who is none other than Resident Evil 5's Sheva Alomar. Now, I know we got rushed. Oh my God, Sheva, holy crap! Like, I know some people want to pretend they don't exist or didn't do anything, but yeah, whenever I hear, oh, Chris defeated Wesker by myself, it makes me just baffled. Like, it's always like a flex. Oh, this proves why Chris. It's like, oh, Chris didn't do this by himself. Sheva was there from the beginning. Chris Redfield would have never made it to Wesker, let alone beat him by himself. No character in Resident Evil would have done that. Sorry, not even you, Leon. Nobody. All right? That was the point of this mission. It was going to take a team as well as some help from other synthesis. But I know what people are thinking. I know where a lot of this hatred comes for with Sheva and why they pretend she don't exist. And it's not even her fault. It's the whole AI with the whole cooperative stuff and how they think the AI is terrible and they associate with Sheva because when you play the game, you play as Chris, so AI goes to Sheva, and it's not very good. But obviously, context in the situation, if you swap it around, then Chris has a bad AI. Not to mention, some of the enemies have some of the bad AI. So why is it only exclusive to Sheva? Who knows? But that's half the reason why people just do not like Sheva, and they always associate her with negativity, and they pretend she doesn't exist. Another reason is how people always blame her for turning Resident Evil 5 into an action game, because originally it was just supposed to be one character, but eventually Sheva got added in. I'm not going to go into all the reasons because that'll be another fight for another day, and I don't feel like it, but you get the point. Everything that's always associated bad always seems to be attached to Sheva, and it's not even her fault. But let's put some context in the situation. Sheva, as I said earlier, might have the ultimate flex of any Resident Evil character. And that's because this was her debut game. This was a game that she ultimately debuted, a mainline Resident Evil game, where she ultimately showed up. And to put context in the situation, this was more than likely her first true mission. Not that she didn't do missions before. We've seen her in the info files that Resident Evil 5 provides, that she obviously had a lot of experience being in guerrilla militia, as well as, how she met up with people that eventually later on her path to join the BSAA. But you could say this was her first real, true, actual, bioorganic weapon mission. Obviously joining up, and not just any mission, guys, but the mission that felled Resident Evil's greatest threat of all time in Wesker. The most important storyline that Resident Evil has ever done. The beginning of the Wesker saga as well as the conclusion. And she's the one that has half a hand in ultimately putting him down for good. And what's absolutely crazy about it, in this whole concept, is the fact that Sheva was only 23 years old when she took on this mission. I mean, guys, you remember how old Chris and Jill were when they took on the mansion mission? Compare that to this mission. Yeah, it is night and day. It is absolutely phenomenal that her at that young age was able to start this mission from the very beginning and actually survive it and complete it. There is no bigger flex than that. I mean, seriously. This is like saying Batman had a brand new sidekick, and on his first mission he felled the Joker or Ra's al Ghul at a young age of a young teenager or something on his first outing in Gotham City. That's insane and remarkable. And yet people will act like, it's this Chris. Chris did it. Chris, as I said, as great as Chris is, would have never been able to survive long enough to get to Wesker, let alone actually beat him. We saw this in the Lost in Nightmares DLC, where even Chris and Jill at their prime couldn't really fell Wesker, not unless you had extreme plot armor or some coincidence happens in the whole game. But somehow, some way, both Chris and Sheva found a way to do it. Amas, they did have help, don't get me wrong, but still doesn't detract from the fact that Sheva this gets no respect. And I don't understand it. It's like when they see the whole conflict between Chris and Wesker, it's like Sheva's just invisible. Like she doesn't exist. She wasn't there. She didn't do anything. I mean, seriously, honestly, I'll ask you guys this question. If Sheva was not there and Chris was on the same mission from the beginning, how far do you think he'll go? And I know there's going to be some jackass say, oh, he'll go all the way. Yeah. That's going to be a hell no. I don't know how far he'd get, but he wouldn't make it to the end. And let alone, he wouldn't even get to Wesker. I'll tell you that much right now. Sheva has one of the best debuts of any Resident Evil brand new character. But unfortunately, like a lot of Resident Evil characters, one and done. In one game, as a major character, and then gone. And she's still in the BSAA as far as we know, so who knows what they're going to do with her storyline in terms of the BSAA going rogue if they ever decide to resolve that. But it just proves my point. And I just don't understand how people just pretend they didn't do anything. If there's one thing I always not stand with terms of Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5 created, it's creating this notion that Leon and Chris do everything, and they do everything with little to no help, and no one really did anything, and they did everything by themselves, which is not true. And the thing is, I'm not even a Sheva fan. I mean, Sheva, I don't know if she'd even make my top 10 favorite Resident Evil characters. But I'm not going to lie to you and just ignore the very obvious. I mean, what she did is insanely impressive. It's an insane flex that nobody ever talks about. And it's absolutely criminal that, like a lot of characters, she hasn't appeared since then. So hopefully I got to you the different forms of disrespect. If I think someone like a Claire is disrespected for people not understanding her character, Jill disrespected how one of the all-time great characters is just sidelined for God knows how long. In this case, Sheva just disrespected because people just pretend she's invisible and didn't even exist at all. All bad forms of disrespect. I don't know what it is, man, but Capcom just, I don't know. They just don't like their ladies. I don't know what it is, man. I think they're awesome, but unfortunately they don't. But as I always like to say, that is my opinion. I want to hear your guys' opinion. How do you feel about Sheva? Why is it you always hear people always say, hey, you know, Chris defeated Wesker, but never give any credit to Sheva. She's just invisible. And do you think she'll ever appear in any Resident Evil game, movie, not a reference, but actually appear and do something? Let me know in the comment section down below. But thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, and hopefully I can see you guys back in the next one. Thanks, and I'll see you all later. Peace.